Esperanza Morales walked into Cedar Ridge's plaza like a woman approaching her own execution. The August sun hammered the packed earth mercilessly, turning the mountain settlement into a furnace. Cowboys slouched against hitching posts, their spurs catching cruel glints of light. Merchants hawked their wares from storefronts bleached bone white by weather and neglect. Women in faded calico hurried past parasols angled against both sun and the crude stares of idle men. Into this ordinary afternoon walked death's own reckoning. Esperanza stopped dead center of the plaza, her dark skin gleaming with perspiration, her homespun dress practical as a shroud. The leather satchel slung across her shoulder bulged with mountain herbs and roots tools of healing in a town that preferred its medicine, mixed with whiskey and false promises. Her eyes swept the gathered men until they locked onto a lone figure sitting on the saloon steps. The stranger was new to Cedar Ridge, trail-worn and dangerous with the easy way his hand rested near his holstered Colt that spoke of intimate familiarity with violence. Unlike the others, he hadn't joined the snickers and whispers that followed her passage. Esperanza squared her shoulders and strode directly toward him. The plaza fell silent, sensing drama about to unfold like a summer thunderstorm. She halted 3 feet from the cowboy, close enough that he had to tilt his head back to meet her gaze from his seated position. "You," she said, her voice carrying across the square like a rifle shot. "Tonight you're coming to my bed." The silence shattered into gasps and catcalls. Men slapped their thighs, tears of mirth streaming down weathered faces. Someone whistled shrilly. Another man shouted something crude about knowing one's place, but the cowboy didn't laugh. His gray eyes, the color of winter storms, studied her with an intensity that made the laughter around them seem suddenly hollow. He saw what the others missed, the tremor in her clenched fists, the desperate calculation in her stance, the way she held herself like someone preparing for a last stand. "Ma'am," he said quietly, his voice a low rumble that somehow cut through the cacophony. "That's a mighty bold proposition for a Sunday afternoon." "I'm not proposing anything improper," Esperanza replied, lifting her chin higher. "I need a husband legal and proper. You look like a man who might listen to reason before you listen to the fools laughing behind you." The laughter stuttered and died. This was different. This wasn't some addled woman making a scene. This was business, serious business. And in Cedar Ridge, business involving marriage and property was never a laughing matter. The cowboy unfolded himself from the steps, rising to his full height. He topped her by a good 4 inches, his broad shoulders blocking out the sun. "Name's Daniel Kane," he said, touching the brim of his hat. "Most folks call me Danny. Esperanza Morales. My father was Joaquin Morales." Recognition flickered across his features. Everyone knew of Joaquin Morales, the Mexican vaquero, who'd somehow secured 200 acres of silver-rich mountain land, back when such things were still possible for a man with brown skin and perfect English. The man who'd died 3 months past under circumstances that had tongues wagging from here to Denver. "I heard about your father," Danny said carefully. "Also heard you might be having some trouble with his holdings." Esperanza's laugh was bitter as alkali water. "Trouble, that's one word for it." She pulled a folded document from her satchel, the official seal visible even from a distance. "Territorial court says I have 30 days to marry or forfeit everything my father built. 23 days have already passed. And the 3 men who were courting you?" Danny asked, demonstrating he'd been in town long enough to hear the gossip. "All 3 discovered pressing business elsewhere. One left for California. Another remembered family obligations in Missouri. The 3rd," she shrugged. "The 3rd was honest enough to admit someone made it worth his while to disappear." Danny's eyes narrowed. "Someone like Mayor Hutchins." Esperanza neither confirmed nor denied, but her silence spoke volumes. Mayor Hutchins owned half the businesses in Cedar Ridge and had his fingers in the other half. He'd been circling Joaquin Morales' land like a vulture for years. "Why me?" Danny asked. "You don't know anything about me. I know you've been in town 3 days. I know Hutchins offered you a job keeping the peace during the upcoming cattle drives. I know you haven't taken his money yet, which means you're either honest or calculating. Either way, you're not in his pocket." Esperanza's voice dropped lower. "And I know you're the kind of man who sits quiet and watches while others make fools of themselves. My father taught me to read people, Mr. Kane. You're my best chance." Danny studied her for a long moment. Around them, the crowd pressed closer, eager to catch every word of this unusual negotiation. "What are you offering?" "Partnership," Esperanza said simply. "Marriage in name legal and binding. I keep my land and my father's legacy. You get 20% of the silver profits and a place to hang your hat when you're not chasing cattle thieves. After a year, if you want to move on, we'll arrange a quiet divorce. No harm to either of us. And if I say no..." Esperanza's shoulders sagged for just a moment before she forced them straight again. "Then, in 7 days, Hutchins takes everything my father bled for. The land the silver claims the house my mother died in. All of it." Her voice hardened. "And I'll spend the rest of my days knowing I could have stopped it if I'd been brave enough to ask a stranger for help." Danny removed his hat, running fingers through sweat-dampened hair. The crowd held its breath. This was better than any traveling show: a desperate woman, a mysterious drifter, and stakes higher than most folks saw in a lifetime. When Zadie asked finally, hope flared in Esperanza's eyes like struck flint. "Tomorrow morning. Judge Peters rides circuit back through here on Tuesday. We could..." "Tonight," Danny interrupted. "Reverend Mills can perform the ceremony. If we're doing this, we're doing it before anyone has time to interfere." Esperanza blinked clearly, not expecting such swift agreement. "You mean..." "I mean what I said. But first you and I need to talk privately." He offered his arm, a gesture so unexpectedly gentlemanly that several onlookers gasped. "Shall we..." Esperanza hesitated only a moment before placing her hand on his arm. Together, they walked through the parting crowd, leaving behind a plaza buzzing with speculation and disbelief. As they passed the general store, Danny caught sight of Mayor Hutchins watching from the window, his face twisted with calculation and growing anger. "He's not going to let this happen easily," Danny murmured. "I know," Esperanza replied. "That's why I chose a man wearing guns." They made their way to the small church at the edge of town, its whitewashed walls and simple cross a stark contrast to the drama unfolding. Inside, afternoon light filtered through plain glass windows, casting long shadows across wooden pews worn smooth by years of worship and worry. "Now," Danny said, settling onto a back pew and gesturing for her to join him. "Tell me the real story. All of it." Esperanza sat her back straight as a ramrod. "My father was born in Sonora, fought in the Mexican-American War, then stayed when the territory changed hands. He knew letters and numbers, could read contracts when most men just made their mark. That's how he got the land previous owner died owing taxes, and Papa was the only one who understood the legal notice posted in Denver. He paid the back taxes and filing fees before anyone else figured out what was happening. Smart man. Too smart for his own good, some would say." Esperanza's fingers twisted in her lap. "He taught me everything: how to read law books, how to figure accounts, how to assay silver ore, how to use these mountains to heal folks when the doctor's medicine failed. He said knowledge was the only protection we had. But not protection enough. No." Esperanza's voice softened. "He started getting sick last winter. Confusion, trembling hands, seeing things that weren't there. Doc Morrison said it was mountain fever, prescribed tonics. Papa got worse. By the end, he didn't even recognize me." Danny's expression darkened. "That doesn't sound like mountain fever." "No, it doesn't." Esperanza reached into her satchel, pulling out a small glass vial. "I found this hidden in Papa's medicine chest after he died. Had a chemist in Denver test the residue. Mercury enough to drive a man mad if given slowly over time." Danny took the vial, holding it up to the light. "You have proof Morrison poisoned your father. Proof enough for me. Not enough for a court that would take a white doctor's word over mine." Esperanza's voice turned fierce. "But if I can keep the land, I can keep fighting. There are others who've suffered under Hutchins's rule. Together, we might build something better." Danny handed back the vial. And you trust me with all this, a stranger who drifted into town wearing guns. My father used to say, desperation makes philosophers of us all. Esperanza met his gaze steadily. Besides, you're not just any drifter. I've heard the stories Daniel Kane, the man who faced down the Garrett gang in Tombstone, the one who negotiated peace between the cattlemen and farmers in Kansas. You solve problems, Mr. Kane. I'm offering you a chance to solve mine. Danny leaned back the pew, creaking under his weight. Those stories get bigger with each telling. I'm just a man who prefers talk to gunplay when possible. Then talk to me. What made you consider my offer? For the first time, something personal flickered across Danny's weathered features. My own father lost his ranch to legal trickery and powerful men. I was too young to help then. Maybe I'm not too old to help now. They sat in companionable silence for a moment, two strangers bound by necessity and a growing sense of shared purpose. Finally, Danny stood, offering his hand to help her rise. Let's find Reverend Mills, he said. Best get this done before Hutchins figures out how to stop us. As they left the church, Esperanza felt a strange mix of hope and trepidation. She'd rolled the dice on this taciturn stranger, staking everything on her ability to read character in a man's eyes. Time would tell if her gamble would pay off. Behind them, the sun sank toward the mountains, painting Cedar Ridge in shades of gold and shadow. And somewhere in those shadows, Mayor Hutchins was already making plans of his own. What happens in We'll discover why someone wanted Joaquin Morales dead, badly enough to poison him slowly, and learn what really drives a mysterious gunfighter to risk everything for a woman he just met. The wedding took place by lantern light in the small church, with only 3 witnesses. Mrs. Chen, the Chinese laundress who'd defied the town council's unwritten rules about foreign businesses. Pete Winters, a grizzled prospector who'd known Joaquin Morales since the early days. And surprisingly, Sheriff Coleman, a decent man, caught between duty and survival. Reverend Mills performed the ceremony with nervous haste, sweat beading on his brow, despite the cool evening air. Danny suspected the preacher had received visitors between afternoon and sunset visitors, bearing both threats and promises. Do you, Daniel James Kane, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife? Mills intoned his voice, barely steady. I do, Danny said, his voice carrying clearly through the small space. Do you, Esperanza Maria Morales, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband? I do. The words came out stronger than she'd expected. Then, by the power vested in me by the territory of Colorado and Almighty God, I pronounce you man and wife. Mills paused, clearly uncomfortable. You may shake hands, I suppose. But Danny surprised everyone, including Esperanza. He lifted her hand to his lips, brushing a gentleman's kiss across her knuckles. Mrs. Kane, he said formally. Mr. Kane, she replied, hoping the lamplight hid her blush. They were signing the register when the church door burst open. Mayor Hutchins stood silhouetted against the night, backed by 3 of his men, including Doc Morrison, whose medical bag seemed oddly heavy for a social call. Well, Hutchins drawled. Heard there was a wedding. Funny how we didn't get invitations. Danny moved smoothly, positioning himself between Hutchins and Esperanza. Private ceremony. Family only. Family. Hutchins's laugh was ugly. A drifter, a half-breed, a Chinaman, and a broken-down prospector. That's the family Esperanza chooses. Better than snakes and thieves, Pete shot back, gripping his walking stick tighter. Hutchins's hand twitched toward his gun, but Danny's voice cut through the tension like a blade. You pull that iron in a church, Hutchins, and you'd better be prepared to use it. Question is, are you ready to meet your maker tonight? The mayor hesitated. Daniel Kane's reputation had preceded him to Cedar Ridge. A man who'd faced down the Garrett gang didn't bluff. No need for unpleasantness, Hutchins said finally. Just wanted to offer congratulations to the happy couple, and to deliver a message. He pulled out an envelope, tossing it onto a pew. Seems old Joaquin borrowed against future silver production. Payments due in full, by week's end. Esperanza started forward, but Danny caught her arm. We'll review any legitimate claims through proper channels, he said evenly. Now you boys have delivered your message. Time to go. Hutchins smiled cold and mean. Oh, we're going. But this ain't over, Kane. You tied yourself to a losing hand. Hope she's worth it. After they left, Esperanza snatched up the envelope, scanning its contents by lamplight. Lies, she breathed. Papa never borrowed from Hutchins. These documents are forgeries. Can you prove it? Danny asked. Papa kept perfect records. Everything's in his strongbox at the cabin. Esperanza's hands shook slightly as she folded the false papers. But a territorial judge might not care about proof, not if Hutchins greases the right palms. Then we'd better make sure we have more than just papers on our side, Danny said grimly. They rode up to Esperanza's cabin in tense silence, Danny's eyes constantly scanning for ambush. The place sat on a natural shelf of rock positioned to see approaching riders from 3 directions. Joaquin Morales had been a careful man. Inside the cabin revealed both comfort and learning. Medical texts lined one wall, while glass jars filled with herbs and tinctures occupied careful shelves. A microscope, expensive and rare, sat on a table beside mortar and pestle. Your father taught you well, Danny observed, examining a detailed anatomical drawing pinned to the wall. He taught me to heal, Esperanza corrected. There's a difference between healing and doctoring, Mr. Kane. Doctoring is what Morrison practices, charging folks $1 for sugar water and calling it medicine. She moved to what appeared to be a simple wooden panel, but her fingers found hidden catches, and it swung open to reveal a cavity containing Joaquin's strongbox. Inside were the real documents, land deeds, silver assays, and a leather journal written in careful Spanish. What does it say? Danny asked as Esperanza read her father's final entries. Her face went white. He knew he was being poisoned. He documented everything, the symptoms, the progression, even his suspicions about who was doing it. She looked up, tears in her eyes. He knew he was dying, but he couldn't prove it. And he was afraid if he accused Hutchins directly, they'd kill me too. Danny took the journal, though he couldn't read Spanish. This could be evidence, written by the victim in a language most judges don't speak. Esperanza's voice was bitter. What court would believe it? Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of breaking glass. A rock sailed through the window, wrapped in paper. Danny moved swiftly, pulling Esperanza down, as more rocks followed, accompanied by shouts from outside. Witches, murdery, mongrel trash. Danny peered through the broken window. Morrison and about 10 men, drunk by the look of them. They're trying to provoke us, Esperanza said. If you shoot, they'll claim self-defense. Then we don't shoot. Danny opened the door and stepped onto the porch, hands visible but ready. Evening, boys. You lose something out there in the dark. Morrison stepped forward, swaying slightly. We're here to serve notice, Kane. That woman you married, she's a witch and a murderess. We got witnesses. Witnesses to what? Saw her dancing naked under the moon, consorting with devils. Saw her poison her own father for his money. Danny's smile was sharp as a knife blade. Naked dancing, that's your evidence. Hell, Morrison, half the territory would hang if that was a crime. Some of the men chuckled, the mood shifting. These weren't hardened killers, just drunk townsmen fired up by liquor and lies. The lady's my wife now. Danny continued, his voice carrying clearly. That makes her welfare my business. Anyone who wants to discuss her character can take it up with me directly. Sober, in daylight, face to face. The crowd began to shift uncomfortably. Daniel Kane in broad daylight was a different proposition than terrorizing a lone woman in the dark. This ain't over, Morrison slurred. No, Danny agreed, but it's over for tonight. After the mob dispersed, Esperanza and Danny barricaded the broken window and settled in for what promised to be a long night. Why? She asked suddenly. Why did you really agree to this marriage? A man with your reputation could write his own ticket anywhere. Danny was quiet for a moment, cleaning his Colts with practiced efficiency. You remember mentioning my father lost his ranch? Esperanza nodded. What I didn't mention was how. Land grabbers used the same tactics Hutchins is using. Forged documents bought judges intimidation. When my father tried to fight back legally, They burned him out. He died a broken man. I'm sorry. I was 16 green as grass, couldn't do anything but watch. Danny's voice hardened. Swore I'd never let it happen again if I had the power to stop it. And now you do. Now I do. He looked at her across the lamplight. Besides, you're not exactly a burden, Mrs. Kane. Takes backbone to walk into a crowd of hostile men and demand what's rightfully yours. Esperanza felt something warm unfurl in her chest. We might actually survive this. We'll do more than survive, Danny said. We'll win. The attack came 3 nights later. Fire arrows shot into the herb garden while they slept. Only Danny's quick reflexes and the rain barrel they'd positioned nearby saved Esperanza's medicinal supplies from complete destruction. But the real assault was yet to come. Dr. Elizabeth Hartley arrived from Denver the next morning, a stern-faced woman in her 50s, carrying an impressive medical bag and credentials from Johns Hopkins Medical College. I'm here to investigate reports of unlicensed medical practice, she announced, standing in the ruins of Esperanza's garden. Dr. Morrison requested a formal review, Danny asked, though he already knew the answer. Mayor Hutchins, actually, as a concerned civic leader. Dr. Hartley's eyes were sharp as she examined the burned plants. Though I must say this hardly looks like the work of amateur herb gathering. Esperanza stepped forward. I'm Esperanza Kane. I assume you're here about my healing practice. Indeed. I understand you've been treating serious ailments without proper medical training or licensing. I've been helping my neighbors with traditional remedies passed down through my family. Esperanza's voice stayed level. The same remedies that kept this community healthy when Dr. Morrison was too drunk to practice. Dr. Hartley's eyebrows rose. That's a serious accusation. It's a true one, Pete Winters said, hobbling up the path. Doc Morrison killed more folks than he cured. This here lady saved my life when I had the mountain fever 2 winters back. More voices joined in Mrs. Chen Sheriff Coleman, even some of the men who'd thrown rocks just days before. They told stories of Morrison's failures and Esperanza's successes, painting a picture that made Dr. Hartley frown thoughtfully. Show me your supplies, she said finally. Esperanza led her through the salvageable remnants of her garden and into the cabin's medicine room. Dr. Hartley examined the carefully labeled jars, the precise notes, the anatomical drawings. Where did you study? She asked. Here. My father taught me everything he learned from doctors in Mexico City, combined with traditional knowledge from local tribes and everything we could learn from medical texts. Dr. Hartley picked up Joaquin's journal, reading the Spanish entries with obvious fluency. Her expression grew increasingly troubled. Your father documented systematic poisoning, she said quietly. These symptoms, confusion tremors, hallucinations, they're classic mercury toxicity. You believe him. I believe his medical observations. They're remarkably precise. Dr. Hartley closed the journal. Mrs. Kane, I came here expecting to find a dangerous charlatan. Instead, I find a skilled healer whose father was murdered by the very doctor who requested this investigation. That evening, Dr. Hartley sat down with Mayor Hutchins in his office. What transpired there would remain private, but the next morning brought dramatic changes. Doc Morrison was found packing, hurriedly claiming urgent family business in Kansas. Mayor Hutchins announced he was stepping down due to health concerns. Most tellingly, Dr. Hartley requested permission to establish a formal medical practice in Cedar Ridge with Esperanza as her partner. How Esperanza asked Danny as they watched their enemies retreat. Sometimes the truth is enough, he replied. Dr. Hartley found Morrison's private supply of mercury compounds, along with detailed instructions from a chemistry professor in Denver. Seems our good doctor had been supplementing his income with selective poisonings for years. And Hutchins, faced with exposure as an accessory to multiple murders, he chose exile over execution. The threat to Esperanza's inheritance evaporated with the forged debt papers. Dr. Hartley's testimony about their obvious fabrication was enough to dismiss them entirely. 6 months later, Cedar Ridge had transformed. The new medical clinic served everyone regardless of their ability to pay. The silver mine operated as a cooperative profits shared among the workers. Most surprisingly, What had begun as a marriage of convenience had evolved into something neither Danny nor Esperanza had expected. "You realize we're actually married now," Danny said one evening as they worked together in the rebuilt herb garden. "Legally, we were always married," Esperanza replied, not looking up from the seedlings she was transplanting. "I meant emotionally." That got her attention. She straightened, wiping her hands on her apron. "Are we—" Danny set down his spade and walked over to her. "Esperanza, what we started as business became partnership. Partnership became friendship. And friendship—" He cupped her face gently. "Friendship became something I didn't expect to find again. Again. I was married before. Lost her and our daughter to cholera in Kansas." Danny's voice roughened. "Swore I'd never risk that kind of pain again." Esperanza's hands covered his. "And now I find that some risks are worth taking." He kissed her softly. "I love you, Mrs. Kane. Not because a preacher said some words, but because you're the strongest, bravest, most remarkable woman I've ever known." Tears traced down Esperanza's cheeks. "I love you too, husband. More than I thought possible when I proposed to you in that dusty plaza." Their kiss was interrupted by a child's voice calling from the cabin. "Mama Esperanza, Papa Danny, come quick." They ran toward the sound, finding young Timothy Johnson, the boy whose life Esperanza had saved from mine fever months earlier, jumping up and down in excitement. "Mrs. Chen's baby is coming," he announced. "She says to fetch the medicine bag and hurry." Danny and Esperanza exchanged glances. Mrs. Chen had married Pete Winters in a quiet ceremony last month, both finding companionship in their golden years. "First delivery for our new family?" Danny asked. "First of many, I hope," Esperanza replied, grabbing her medical supplies. They hurried toward town, where a crowd had gathered outside Pete's cabin. Dr. Hartley emerged beaming. "Healthy boy," she announced. "Mrs. Winters is doing beautifully." As they celebrated with the community they'd helped transform, Danny pulled Esperanza aside. "Any regrets about that scandalous proposition you made?" Esperanza laughed, the sound rich and joyful. "Only that it took me so long to work up the courage. And the future." She looked out over Cedar Ridge, where former enemies now worked together, where healing was available to all, where love had grown from the most practical of beginnings. "The future looks very bright indeed, Mr. Kane." 5 years after that desperate proposition in the plaza, Esperanza stood in the medical college classroom she'd helped establish, addressing a group of eager students, both men and women, representing every background and ethnicity in the territory. "Healing," she told them, "is not about diplomas or credentials. It's about knowledge, compassion, and the courage to act when others would turn away." In the back of the room, Danny watched with pride as his wife, no longer just in name, but in every way that mattered, shared the wisdom that had once been dismissed as witchcraft. Their own children, 2 daughters and a son, sat in the front row, absorbing lessons that would shape their understanding of justice, healing, and love. After class, as students filed out chattering excitedly about their upcoming examinations, Danny approached his wife. "Proud of you," he said simply. "Proud of us," Esperanza corrected. "None of this would have happened without a certain gunfighter who said yes to a desperate woman's proposal." Danny chuckled. "Best business arrangement I ever made." "Business arrangement?" Esperanza raised an eyebrow. "Mr. Kane, are you suggesting our marriage is still just a contract?" "No, ma'am," Danny said, pulling her close. "I'm suggesting it's the best thing that ever happened to either of us." Outside, the sun set over the mountains that had witnessed their unlikely beginning. And in Cedar Ridge, a town reborn through one woman's bold gamble and one man's unexpected gallantry, the evening bells rang out over a community where healing was honored, justice prevailed, and love had proved stronger than fear. The scandalous proposition that had once shocked a town had become the foundation of something beautiful and lasting, proof that sometimes the most desperate gambles yield the richest rewards.